Calling for help feels like a transfer. You dial the number, and whatever is happening is supposed to move out of your hands and into someone else's. Fear becomes shared. Urgency becomes visible. Responsibility shifts. That belief is built into the act itself. You are not just asking for assistance. You are signaling that something has crossed a line where ordinary coping no longer applies. Most people never rehearse this moment. They do not practice what they will say. They do not plan how they will sound. The call happens because something has already gone wrong. A fall, a sudden pain, a noise that does not belong, a silence that lasts too long. The phone rings. There is often a pause before anyone speaks. Not long enough to matter technically, but long enough to register emotionally. In that pause, expectations gather. Someone will hear this. Someone will understand. Someone will come. The assumption is not just that help exists, but that it activates automatically once the call is made. That assumption feels reasonable. Emergency systems are designed to feel immediate. The number is short. The branding is clear. The promise is simple. Help is one call away. When the line connects, a voice answers. Calm, measured, neutral. They ask questions. What is your location? What is happening right now? Is anyone injured? The questions do not change if the caller is calm or frantic. They do not speed up when someone is crying. They do not slow down when someone is struggling to breathe. This can feel wrong in the moment, because the caller is not trying to tell a story. They are trying to transmit urgency. They are trying to make someone else feel how serious this is. But the system is not listening for seriousness. It is listening for structure. Every emergency response system begins by turning human experience into something it can move. Words become categories. Descriptions become codes. Emotion becomes background noise. This is not cruelty. It is necessity. The system cannot respond to fear directly. It cannot dispatch panic or uncertainty. It has to translate what it hears into something operational. That translation begins immediately, before anyone is sent. Before any siren sounds, before help is even possible. The caller rarely realizes this is happening. They assume the most important part is being heard. It is not. The most important part is being understood in the system's terms. That difference matters. Two people can call with the same problem and receive very different responses. Not because one mattered more, but because one fit the system's language more cleanly. A clear address moves faster than a vague one. A visible symptom moves faster than a described feeling. A known pattern moves faster than an unfamiliar situation. The system does not know who is most afraid. It knows what it can classify. This is the moment where outcomes begin to diverge. Not when responders are delayed, not when resources are scarce, but at intake, at the point where a human voice becomes data. The call that gets help quickly is often the call that is easiest to place inside an existing pathway. The call that stalls is often the one that does not quite match what the system expects to hear. Nothing about this feels like denial. No one says no. No one refuses service. No one hangs up. Instead, something quieter happens. The call waits. It is reassessed. It is marked as pending. From the outside, this feels like the system hesitating. From the inside, it feels like the system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Emergency response systems are built to prioritize under pressure. They are designed to function when demand exceeds capacity. They do not collapse when overwhelmed. They sort. And sorting always begins with interpretation. By the time help arrives or does not, the most important decision has already been made. Not about whether the situation matters, but about how the system understands it. This episode is about that decision, about what emergency systems hear, about what they cannot hear, and about why the call that sounds urgent to a human does not always sound actionable to a system. Because the moment the line connects is not the moment help begins. It is the moment the system decides what kind of help is possible. Part 1. What the system hears. When the call is answered, the system begins translating. This translation happens faster than the caller realizes. While the person on the line is still trying to explain what is wrong, the system is already narrowing possibilities. Location comes first, then safety, then symptoms, then immediacy. These are not casual questions. They are gates. Emergency response systems cannot act on stories. They act on categories. Each answer moves the call closer to a known pathway or leaves it suspended between them. Call takers follow structured protocols. They are trained to guide the conversation towards signals the system recognizes. The questions are standardized because variation is dangerous. Under pressure, consistency keeps the system from fragmenting. From the caller's perspective, this can feel impersonal. They may be frightened. They may be unsure what matters. They may be trying to describe something that does not yet have a name. But the system is not listening for completeness. It is listening for clarity. Clarity does not mean truth. It means fit. A symptom that matches a known pattern moves faster than one that does not. Chest pain with classic indicators moves quickly. A vague sense that something is wrong does not. Shortness of breath with measurable distress moves. Shortness of breath described as, "It just feels bad," slows. This is not because the system doubts the caller. It is because the system cannot act without alignment. Every emergency response organization operates under finite capacity. Dispatchers cannot send everyone at once. Units cannot be everywhere. Time, vehicles, and personnel are all limited. So the system relies on triage at the point of intake. That triage is invisible to most callers. They hear questions and answers. What they do not hear is the categorization happening beneath the conversation. Is this life-threatening right now? Is there a clear mechanism of injury? Is the situation escalating or stable? Is there an identifiable endpoint? Each answer narrows the field. Emotion does not help with this process. In fact, emotion can interfere. High distress, without clear information, often slows classification. The system must pause, clarify, and re-ask. What feels like urgency to the caller can feel like noise to the system. This creates a quiet mismatch. The caller believes they are conveying seriousness. The system is trying to locate specificity. Neither is wrong. They are simply operating under different constraints. Dispatchers are trained to control the flow of information. They interrupt. They redirect. They repeat questions. This is not to assert authority. It is to extract what the system needs to act. The faster a call produces recognizable signals, the faster it moves. Clear address, clear symptoms, clear risk. Calls that provide these elements early are easier to place. Calls that do not linger. This is where misunderstanding often begins. People assume that emergency response is driven by empathy, that the system hears fear and responds accordingly. But empathy is not actionable at scale. The system must convert fear into something it can route. And some experiences resist conversion, chronic conditions, ambiguous symptoms, situations that feel wrong but are hard to describe. These calls often require more time, more questioning, more reassessment. They are not ignored, they are delayed. Delay does not feel like care to the person waiting. It feels like disbelief. It feels like being downgraded. But the system does not experience this as judgment. It experiences it as uncertainty. Uncertainty is costly. Calls that cannot be clearly classified consume attention longer. They tie up call takers. They complicate dispatch decisions. They increase the risk of sending the wrong resource, so the system becomes cautious. Caution looks like slowing down. Slowing down looks like waiting. Waiting feels like neglect. This is the gap where trust erodes. Another layer complicates this translation. History. Emergency systems remember, even when they pretend not to. Repeat calls from the same number or address carry context. Prior outcomes shape interpretation. A location associated with frequent non-emergent calls may trigger additional screening. A caller known to the system may be classified more quickly, for better or worse. This is not bias in the personal sense. It is pattern recognition. Patterns help systems manage load. They also flatten nuance. A call is not just evaluated on what is said in the moment, but on how it fits into what has been heard before. This is where two calls with similar content begin to diverge. One fits an established path, one does not. One moves forward, one stalls. Nothing about this process feels like denial. No one is told they do not matter. The call remains open. The The system continues to monitor, but the speed changes. And speed is the resource everyone assumes is guaranteed. Emergency response systems are designed to do the most good with what they have. They are built to perform under pressure. They do not fail when demand rises. They reorganize. That reorganization starts with listening, not listening for pain, listening for signals. Understanding this does not make waiting easier. It does not make outcomes fairer, but it explains why the experience of calling for help often feels so different from the expectation. The system is not asking how scared you are. It is asking whether it knows what to do next. And once the system runs out of easy answers, time begins to stretch. That is where the next decision begins. Part 2. When time becomes a resource. Emergency response systems are built around speed, sirens, lights, arrival times measured in minutes. This creates the impression that time is something the system can always provide. It cannot. Time is not an infinite input. It is a finite resource managed under constant pressure. At any given moment, there are only so many available units. Ambulances are already on calls. Fire crews are engaged. Police officers are spread across jurisdictions. Dispatchers are managing multiple incidents simultaneously. Most of the time, this works. Calls come in. Resources are sent. Capacity flexes. But when demand rises, the system does not slow evenly. It prioritizes. That prioritization is not based on compassion. It is based on risk. Risk to life. Risk of escalation. Risk of cascading failure. When resources are available, uncertainty can be absorbed. A unit can be sent to check something out. A borderline call can be treated as urgent, just in case. When resources tighten, that margin disappears. The system must choose, not between people, between uses of time. Every minute spent on one call is a minute unavailable for another. Every unit dispatched commits personnel and equipment for an unknown duration. This is where time stops being neutral. It becomes something the system has to allocate deliberately. Calls with clear high-risk indicators move quickly. They justify immediate use of scarce time. Calls with uncertain trajectories become harder to place. They are not ignored. They are queued. Queuing is invisible to the caller. From the outside, it feels like nothing is happening. From inside the system, the call is being held until enough certainty or capacity exists to act. This is not hesitation. It is containment. The system is trying to avoid making a choice that will prevent it from responding to something worse. Under normal conditions, queues clear quickly. Under strain, they lengthen. And as they lengthen, the meaning of urgency changes. Urgent no longer means soon. It means sooner than something else. This is a difficult shift to experience. The caller assumes urgency transfers with the call, that by naming the problem, they have passed the burden of deciding to someone else. But the system cannot accept that transfer fully. It must weigh each call against the others it is already carrying. This is where two calls that sound similar begin to separate. One arrives when resources are available. One arrives when the system is saturated. The difference is not in the call. It is in the moment. Time of day matters. Geography matters. Weather matters. Ongoing incidents matter. A call placed at noon enters a system at full staffing. Supervisors are present. Specialized units are on duty. Support resources are nearby. A call placed at 3 in the morning enters a leaner system by design. Fewer units are staffed. Backup takes longer. Decision-making relies more heavily on protocol than discretion. Neither system is failing. They are operating as planned, but the outcomes diverge. When capacity tightens, the system becomes conservative with time. It avoids committing resources unless the return is clear. It favors situations with known endpoints. It delays those that might stretch unpredictably. Ambiguity is expensive. A call that could turn into a long engagement competes poorly with one that can be resolved quickly. Again, this is not judgment. It is triage applied to time. The system does not think in terms of fairness. It thinks in terms of survivability. If too many resources are tied up, response collapses. If response collapses, everyone waits longer, so the system protects itself. It does so by slowing some calls down to preserve the ability to move quickly for others. This is where waiting begins to feel personal. The caller is still on the line, or has been told to wait, or has been assured someone will come. From their perspective, nothing is happening. From the system's perspective, everything is happening. Dispatchers are watching unit availability change in real time. Why? Supervisors are making trade-offs. Calls are being reprioritized as new information arrives. The system is alive. It is just not moving toward you. This creates a dangerous illusion. Waiting feels passive, but waiting is an active state for the system. Your call is occupying space. It is consuming attention. It is part of the load the system is managing. The longer the wait, the more pressure builds. For the caller, fear escalates. For the system, risk assessment evolves. If new information arrives, the call may jump forward. If not, it may continue to sit. This is why emergency response does not feel linear. Help does not arrive steadily closer. It arrives in jumps. One moment, nothing. The next, sirens, or not. This unpredictability is not a bug. It is a consequence of operating at the edge of capacity. When time becomes a resource, not everyone receives it equally. Some calls move immediately. Some calls stall. Some resolve themselves before help arrives. And when that happens, the system rarely knows what the waiting cost. By the time a call is cleared, the system moves on. The time has been spent. What remains is the question of who absorbed it. That question becomes harder to answer as waiting stretches, and it becomes more complicated when history enters the picture. Part 3. The calls that move, and the calls that stall. Once time becomes scarce, the system begins to recognize patterns, not consciously, not with intent. Through repetition, calls that move quickly tend to share characteristics. They arrive with clear signals. They fit established categories. They point toward known responses with predictable endpoints. A visible injury, a witness collapse, a fire with a clear address, a situation that can be resolved by dispatching a specific unit. These calls move because the system knows how to carry them. They have trajectories. The calls that stall are different. They arrive without a clear frame. Symptoms are evolving. The danger is felt more than observed. The situation sounds serious but does not map cleanly onto a script. These calls do not disappear. They remain open. They are reassessed. They are updated. But they do not move. This difference rarely feels like prioritization to the system. It feels like prudence. Sending a unit without clarity risks misallocation. It risks pulling resources away from a call that cannot wait. Under strain, the system becomes careful about committing to uncertainty, so it waits. Waiting is not neutral. As waiting stretches, calls acquire history. A call that has been pending for a while begins to feel stable. If nothing catastrophic has happened yet, the system reads that as information, not certainty, but reassurance. This is how urgency softens without anyone deciding to soften it. The call does not resolve. It simply stops escalating. This creates a feedback loop. The longer a call waits, the less likely it is to trigger immediate action. The less immediate the action, the longer the wait becomes. From the system's perspective, this makes sense. From the caller's perspective, it feels like being forgotten. History deepens this divide. Emergency response systems do not forget past interactions. Addresses, phone numbers, and caller histories travel with the call. They provide context. They also shape expectation. A location associated with frequent non-emergent calls may be screened more carefully. A caller known for repeated requests may encounter additional questioning. A place that often resolves without dispatch may be deprioritized under strain. This is not punishment. It is pattern recognition. Patterns help systems manage load. They reduce uncertainty. They allow faster decisions. But patterns flatten individuals. A call is not just heard as itself. It is heard as part of a sequence. This is where credibility quietly enters the system. Not credibility as honesty, credibility as predictability. Calls that have produced actionable outcomes in the past move more easily. Calls that have not require more confirmation. This is rarely visible to the person on the line. They believe they are calling for the first time. The system hears them as a continuation. This difference is subtle and powerful. It explains why two people with similar situations can experience radically different response times. It explains why some callers feel heard immediately and others feel stuck in limbo. It also explains why delay rarely feels like denial. No one says no. No one closes the call. No one refuses help. Instead, the call remains active without momentum. For the system, this is containment. For the caller, it is suspension. Suspension is difficult to endure. It leaves people without guidance, without certainty, without a sense of progress. They may call again. They may try to escalate. They may become more distressed. Ironically, increased distress can further slow classification. Emotion introduces noise. Noise requires clarification. Clarification takes time. The system tightens its questions. The caller feels interrogated. Trust erodes. This is where normalization begins. People who have waited before expect to wait again. They adjust expectations downward. They delay calling. They attempt to manage situations themselves longer than they should. By the time they do call, the situation may be worse. From the system's perspective, the call appears to have escalated suddenly. From the caller's perspective, it has been building quietly. This gap matters. It shapes outcomes. It also shapes how the system is used. Some people learn how to speak the system's language. They know which words trigger faster response. They know how to describe symptoms in ways that fit scripts. They know when to emphasize and when to stay quiet. Others do not. Language, familiarity, and confidence begin to influence speed, not intentionally. Structurally, the system rewards calls that arrive already translated. Those that do not arrive that way must be translated under pressure. Translation takes time. This is where inequity creeps in without ever being named. Calls that move are not always the most urgent. They are the most legible. Calls that stall are not unimportant. They are ambiguous. Ambiguity is expensive, so the system pushes it outward. It lets ambiguity wait. From the inside, this feels like responsible triage. From the outside, it feels like abandonment. Both perceptions can be true at the same time. Nothing in this process requires bad actors. No one has to decide that some people matter less. The sorting happens quietly through accumulated logic and constrained time. And once it begins, it is difficult to interrupt, because interrupting it would require the system to absorb uncertainty again, and uncertainty is exactly what it no longer has room to carry. Part 4. Where the cost of waiting lands. The effects of waiting do not arrive all at once. There is no single moment when delay becomes damage, no clear signal that says this is now dangerous. Instead, the cost of waiting spreads outward, shaped by timing, location, and circumstance. By the time consequences are visible, they often feel disconnected from the call that began it. The first place the cost lands is time. Not time as the system measures it, but time as people live it. Minutes stretch differently when you are unsure whether help is coming. The absence of information fills the space. Every sound is reinterpreted. Every sensation is questioned. Is it getting worse? Did I explain it wrong? Should I call again? Calling again feels risky. Too many calls might make things worse. Too few might mean nothing happens at all. This uncertainty creates hesitation. People wait longer than they should. They second-guess themselves. They try to manage situations that are already beyond what they can handle. By the time help arrives, the situation may have changed. The system does not see this interval. It sees the time between dispatch and arrival. Everything before that is invisible. The next place the cost lands is geography. Urban areas tend to have denser coverage. Units are closer together. Backup is nearby. If one resource is unavailable, another may be minutes away. Rural areas operate differently. Distances are longer. Units are fewer. A single call can occupy the only available responder for miles. When a rural call stalls, there may be nowhere else to draw from. Waiting is not just a matter of sequencing. It is a matter of isolation. This changes outcomes. A delay that is survivable in a city can become dangerous in a remote area. A condition that might stabilize with quick assessment can deteriorate when assessment is hours away. The system understands this in the abstract. It cannot fix it in the moment. The cost also lands unevenly across types of need. Situations with visible escalation tend to trigger faster response. Situations that unfold quietly do not. Pain that does not announce itself loudly waits longer. Symptoms that do not fit crisis patterns are managed later. Chronic conditions blur into the background. None of this feels like refusal. It feels like being deprioritized. And deprioritization feels personal. The cost also lands on families. People become caregivers without preparation. Decisions that should have been supported become solitary. Responsibility shifts quietly from the system to the people waiting. They improvise, they guess, they hope. If the outcome is good, the delay disappears from memory. If it is not, the delay becomes a question that never fully resolves. Would it have been different if help came sooner? The system cannot answer that. Another place the cost lands is on the responders themselves. Dispatchers know which calls are waiting. They see the queue. They feel the pressure of competing needs. They carry awareness of the calls they cannot move. Responders know when they arrive late. They know when a situation has progressed beyond what it might have been earlier. They carry that knowledge with them. Inside emergency services, there is language for this, not guilt. Weight. The weight of making the best possible choice inside a system that cannot meet every need at once. Over time, that weight accumulates. It changes how people work, how cautious they become, how quickly they escalate or defer. This is how strain becomes normal. When delay is frequent, it stops feeling exceptional. Waiting becomes expected. Both callers and responders adjust their expectations downward. This normalization is dangerous because it is quiet. No alarm sounds when waiting becomes routine. No metric captures the erosion of trust or the hesitation to call. The system continues to function. Calls are answered. Units are dispatched. Reports are written. From the outside, it looks like nothing is wrong. The cost also lands downstream. Situations that were not resolved early become more complex later. Emergency departments receive patients who might have been stabilized earlier. Families arrive exhausted. Conditions worsen. The delay does not show up as a failure of emergency response. It shows up as increased severity somewhere else. The connection is rarely made. By the time harm appears, the origin is already buried beneath layers of reasonable decisions. This is what makes waiting hard to measure. It does not announce itself. It does not spike metrics. It does not produce a single point of failure. It accumulates. And accumulation does not feel urgent until it is too late. The system does not experience this as loss. It experiences survival. Calls were answered. Resources were protected. Collapse was avoided. From the human perspective, something else happened. Uncertainty lingered. Responsibility shifted. Risk was absorbed by people who had no control over the system's limits. This is not where emergency response breaks. This is where it adapts. An adaptation, while necessary, always has a cost. That cost does not fall evenly. It falls where waiting can be endured the longest. Part 5. When the system is still working. Most people never experience an emergency response failing. They experience emergency response holding together. Calls are answered. Units remain in service. The system continues to function. From inside the system, this is success. No dispatcher stops taking calls. No responder abandons their post. No formal threshold is crossed that declares collapse. Nothing breaks. And yet, something shifts. Because once demand exceeds what can be handled immediately, emergency response does not stop working. It changes how it works. Help becomes conditional. Speed becomes relative. Waiting becomes distributed. The system does not decide who deserves help. It decides how to preserve its ability to respond at all. That decision happens quietly. It happens in prioritization codes, in queue placement, in the difference between now and soon. By the time anyone notices the effect, the system has already adapted. This is the defining characteristic of modern emergency response systems. They are built to survive pressure, not to eliminate it. When strained, they protect continuity by shifting burden outward. They do not fail. They export cost. That cost moves away from the center of the system and toward the edges, toward callers who wait, toward families who manage alone, toward responders who carry unresolved outcomes. No single decision causes this. It emerges from thousands of reasonable choices made under constraint. The dispatcher follows protocol. The supervisor manages coverage. The responder prioritizes what they can reach. Each action makes sense. Together, they reshape who experiences delay. From the outside, this can look like indifference. From the inside, it feels like triage. Both perspectives are incomplete on their own. Understanding this does not make waiting easier. It does not erase harm or guarantee better outcomes. But it does make the system visible. It shows that what feels like neglect is often prioritization under pressure. That what feels personal is usually structural. That what feels random is almost always patterned. Emergency response does not promise equal speed. It promises survival. And survival in systems like this depends on distributing risk. Some calls move quickly, some calls stall. Some help arrives in time, some arrives later than it should. The system remains intact. That is precisely the point. Like hospitals managing capacity, like power grids shedding load, emergency response systems continue operating by deciding where waiting can be tolerated. They are still working, and because they are still working, the cost of that work is borne quietly, unevenly, and often invisibly. Seeing this does not weaken the system. It allows better questions to be asked. Not just whether help came, but when it came, why it came then, and why waiting became the answer so often before it did. The call that gets help and the one that doesn't are rarely separated by need. They are separated by how systems behave when they no longer have room to absorb uncertainty. That line is not announced, it is crossed. Subscribe for long-form stories about how systems actually behave when they operate under pressure. Each episode of The Deciding Line follows the quiet moment where ordinary rules shift and the cost of keeping the system working is carried by someone else.